Have you heard of tree planting initiatives? Let's talk about carbon offsetting. Carbon offsets can help mitigate climate change by reducing or removing from the atmosphere the greenhouse gases that cause the planet to warm. Critics of the practice believe it ignores the larger picture. In order to make meaningful strides against the current climate crisis, individuals and industries drastically reduce their overall carbon emissions fast. Since the mid-20th century, human activity caused by burning of fossil fuels has resulted in increasing greenhouse gas emissions. Just to note, I hate the term human activity or human supremacy as it often blames everyone and not corporate-powered interests and the role of colonization. And as we all know, that's not a good thing, right? Greenhouse gases trap heat in the atmosphere, resulting in rising temperatures of our planet. Major greenhouse gas contributors like methane, nitrous oxide, water vapor, and fluorinated synthetic gases are all terrible for the environment. But if we're going to stand a chance in reversing climate change, there's one main culprit we have to get a handle on, which is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is unique in that it reflects less heat compared to other gases while lasting longer in the atmosphere. In 2018, carbon dioxide accounted for nearly 81% of greenhouse gas emissions, and as of January 2021, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was 460.53 ppm. Carbon dioxide levels have never been this high, and the stakes of what it can mean is truly critical. So what are the shortcomings of carbon offsets? Although carbon offset projects such as planting trees are great long-term initiatives, they don't address our reliance on the fossil fuels that are primarily responsible for the crisis. Trees take decades to reach maturity where they pull a meaningful amount of carbon out of the atmosphere, and we don't have that much time to address climate change. As we know it has become a key buzzword in many elite climate conferences and how brands position themselves through these projects. The reality is that these projects have existed for years since the early 2000s, so to me it's disappointing to see that these trends are now becoming popular. Getting to net zero emissions, which is the balance between the number of greenhouse gases produced and the amount removed from the atmosphere, will require a fundamental overhaul of our energy system. And while international undertakings like the Paris Agreement, adopted by 196 countries in an effort to work towards a healthier planet by shifting their priorities to net zero emissions, are promising to some extent, but some scientists believe that net zero goals are not enough to combat the climate crisis we face anyway. During Trump's presidency, our commitment to the Paris Agreement was opted out. We rejoined it when the Biden administration re-entered. In the past, the most common type of carbon offset projects were planting trees. However, in recent years, companies have pivoted towards supporting clean energy and technology in an effort to try to absorb CO2, such as introducing efficient cooking stoves in areas where cooking over open fires is common, capturing methane at landfills, and other green alternatives. But the truth is that these climate technologies truly do not represent holistic Earth-based systems rooted in regeneration and reciprocity. Climate tech has become such a huge issue in today's world as it's rooted in greenwashing, and my friend Kamea, who goes by Green Dreamer Kamea, discusses the issues with climate technology in the modern environmental movement. Carbon offsets can be good and bad idea, right? But they're not going to fix the climate crisis. Take for example, Ecosia and ecology that is being eco-friendly driven by having tree planting initiatives across the country, giving opportunities for those who live in those lands employment. And I actually had the privilege to meet both of their teams, and they are so lovely and centered on planetary well-being for everyone. I tend to think in a non-binary framework in order to add nuance to these topics, as I understand that it's not easy to sway into a yes or no when we grow up to choose in a binary way. We must stay critical and be wary of the tactics that are being used in these climate tech solutions, and also to really have these conversations beyond the global north. The darker issue is how global north governments fail to prioritize the need for planetary health and outcome their source for pollution. Carbon colonialism is when rich global north countries outsource emissions to less wealthy ones to allow for the increased effectiveness of production for emission targets. Why should countries that have been exploited by colonialism and imperialism be the ones opening lands to corporations and institutions outside of their countries to plant forests as if their people have not been tending the land? And this is where we get into anti-indigeneity and the threat climate tech has in displacing indigenous communities. Forget the scammers who lack transparency and traceability in their own projects, but let's actually closely analyze the impact of carbon offsetting projects. In some cases, it was found how indigenous communities were being pushed out of their own forests in order for the government to be able to implement carbon offsetting programs. These are kind of the huge concerns in the critiques in the idea of these greenwashing tools that are being presented to many governments and corporations. So what are some examples of some certifications? Verified Carbon Standard, founded in 2005. This organization focuses on developing projects in different countries while measuring impact and ensuring jurisdictional sovereignty for the people living in those communities. Number 2 is Gold Standard, an organization that spends every dollar donated to support local communities and ecosystems. It also follows the United Nations program of education for local communities to ensure that they are creating success. You can support a variety of projects from different regions around the world. And the other program that I did research on is Green E Climate Certified. This is a certification program that is endorsed by the American Carbon Registry, the Climate Reserve Gold Standard, and Verified Carbon Standard. They work with the supply chain and corporate markets to make sure they are on track to meet their carbon offsetting goals. Number 4 is Bonneville Environmental Foundation. The nonprofit empowers business to find balance with the environment by channeling carbon offsets to remove carbon from the atmosphere or in preventing greenhouse gases from getting there in the first place by financing things like forest conservation projects or clean energy. If a company says they're offsetting their emissions, be sure they're doing it through a vetted organization, otherwise it may be greenwashing. And they shouldn't stop there. If a company is serious about addressing climate change, they should also be reducing their carbon footprint and advocating for the legislative change necessary to bring about resolutions in the climate crisis. I am someone who believes in both individual and systemic change, and we cannot allow for one-dimension sets of conversations. In essence, I do think it's noted to worth that we don't have an excess amount of land in our lifetime, and at the rate at which corporations are polluting the planet is overwhelmingly concerning. As the climate crisis continues to alter ecosystems, the need for water resources will also become a dire issue. And for me, I do believe there are good intentional projects and organizations that are carbon offsetting apps, but I also acknowledge how governments from the global north countries have co-opted the term and reinforced the popularization of the tool, which gets married to the term climate justice in Western elite climate conferences. Do your research, ask questions, and to know that carbon offsetting is sometimes the beginning for people to get into environmentalism. If you love my work, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me in creating independent forms of media that I've been wanting to create for so long for all of you. Thank you so much.